Welcome to the Water People podcast, where we talk story with some of the most adept waterfolk on the planet. I'm your host, Lauren Hill, joined by my partner, Dave Rastovich. For us, the podcast is a chance to dive into the aquatic experiences that really shape who we become back on land. This season is supported by Patagonia, whose purpose-driven mission is to use business to save our home planet. In the spirit of reconciliation, we acknowledge the Bundjalung Nation, the traditional custodians of the land and waters where we work and play, who have cared for this sea country for tens of thousands of years. Respect and gratitude to all First Nations people, including elders past, present, and emerging. Today we're in conversation with Christian and Ka'alemalu Sea, a couple of dynamic waterfolk who have built the kind of life that so many of us aspire to, one that is daily determined by ocean conditions. Together, Christian and Ka'alemalu own and operate Nalankala Retreat, a hand-built, off-grid slice of paradise overlooking a gorgeous right-hander on Sumba Island in Indonesia. Christian started life in the Atlantic on the 48-foot wooden sailboat that his father rebuilt. Launching from their homestead on St. Thomas, Christian then chased waves in Fiji, Tahiti, New Zealand, Hawaii, and Australia before settling on the Big Island of Hawai'i, where he earned a degree in marine science, and eventually he worked up the nerve to ask out Ka'alemalu. Bree Ka'alemalu Sea, or Ka'ale for short, is a surfer and a dive instructor who was homeschooled on the wild Puna Coast of the Big Island. In her late teens, she took off to explore the wider world, spending time elsewhere in Polynesia, as well as Thailand, India, Nepal, and Indonesia. She eventually settled back on the Big Island, where she studied Hawaiian culture, and together with Christian, they nurtured a rustic homestead and put permaculture principles to practice in the jungle. As a couple, they spent 10 years as the in-house waterman and woman at one of the best hotels in the world before packing up their truck to camp on the land that is now Nalankala Retreat. Over the past decade, they've established flourishing food gardens to help feed visiting adventurers and have built a collection of cliff-top perched traditional Sumbanese guest houses. Christian and Ka'ale have 3 daughters, all homeschooled on the remote west coast of Sumba. They are precisely the kind of inspired family that we always hope to get to share time with while on the road. This podcast very nearly didn't happen. We were on the island of Sumba, which is just a few islands to the east of Bali. It was early in the morning. We had only a few hours before we had to drive overland to get on a flight because our little boy Minnow had broken his arm the day before, and we had been meaning to do this podcast for a few days, but we were having such a great time with Christian and Ka'ale, getting to know them better. We'd put off the actual recording, and so we managed to sneak in a couple of hours, well, an hour and a half maybe, just as the sun was rising while our son and their youngest girl, Lele, was still sleeping. And yeah, we were happy to be able to squeeze it in before we had to get on the road and get Minnow to medical care, of which there wasn't really any nearby.
That's right. Yeah, the cardboard splint, which was expertly placed on Minnow's arm, was just cardboard and sticky tape. Yeah,
thanks to Surf Guide
Rudy. It was
Rudy.
Expertly done, but it was just cardboard and sticky tape. And you could see the step in the bone in his forearm that we needed to tend to, and the poor little guy was just on kids' Panadol dealing with it. And so it made for quite a spectacular end to a great adventurous trip for our family.
Truly memorable. Maybe in not the way, all the ways you would hope, but some of the ways you would hope.
We were very buckled. So when we were leaving, I was in a wheelchair with 2 blown out knee ligaments, and Minnow was sitting on my lap with the cardboard splint on his arm. and you were fine.
I was the mule with all the backpacks pushing them through the airport.
You were the one questioning being a part of the Rastovich clan and our ability to have adventures, but, to pay the band when you want to dance every now and again. And that's pretty much how that family trip went. Though it was in the company of such wonderful people, and I knew that we were all going to have such a great time together because of the, I guess, rumors and the echoes of Christian and Ka'ale and their place and their spirit, and that through many mutual friends, they knew that we would all really click, and so many similarities in our paths and personalities were really fun to explore. And that was illustrated for me actually the first night we got there when we got onto the island rather late, when we went straight to their place at sundown. We got to see the sun going down over the incredible piece of coastline that they call home, and Minnow was with us walking on the stones among the living area outside, and he got hit by a scorpion on his foot, and the poor little guy had to deal with a scorpion bite. And Christian was so wonderful and sweet, though not an alarmist when that happened, that really gave me an insight into his personality and spirit, because I very much love to see the response we all have when shit hits the fan. I feel like it's a moment in time where you really get to see someone's personality, someone's spirit without any of the filters or controlling elements overlaid. When someone's hurting or it's an emergency situation, you really get to see each other's, the depths of people's being. And that was just great, because Minnow was, he dropped to the ground. We were like, holy shit, what's happened now? What was that? Was that a snake? There was lots of snake stories.
It was a confronting moment for me as a parent. I was keeping calm on the outside, but inside definitely having a moment of panic, because I didn't know about scorpion. Well, we didn't even know that it was a scorpion. Yeah. Christian just told us that it probably was a scorpion. Yeah. So and I didn't know if they were poisonous or, all the details that you would be Googling under normal circumstances, but we had no phone, no reception.
Yeah, and it was great because Christian was really loving and kind, but there was just no drama there, and I was like, full respect, that's great, I love that. And then the next day Minnow got an urchin in his foot, and then the next day he got another scorpion bite on his hand. So we were on quite a roll, and it was a great time. And it was also
it wasn't all at Nullagala.
No, it wasn't. It was not just on the island.
So incredible. I just feel like we had our bums smacked by the island of Sumba, and we were sent away a little bit. Yeah. And nothing to do with their place.
No, not at all. But it's also just, one of those things where that's one of those moments to me where I said it jokingly before, you got to pay the band if you want to dance. But really that is what it's like. If you're having an adventurous life, there's always a give and a take, a push and a pull, and a light and a shadow. And that experience just deepened everything for me about being on that island, about being with these wonderful, adventurous people. And it's life unfiltered, and it is life. And life is wild on this beautiful blue planet. And as much as we like to control and be in the driver's seat with the hands on the wheel and the foot on the pedal or the brake, it's great to just let it all go. And
except when your child is crying in pain. It's not that great.
It's not great. So that morning, I really wanted to be there for the whole conversation, because we've had so many great moments and conversing during our stay there. I'm so grateful that you got up early and that Christian was up for that early. And I just remember waking up with these little murmurings outside with the dawn chorus of birds waking up, looking at Minnow, and he was still asleep. And so I managed to slip out and waddle over with my two blown out knees and just sit in and listen to these two wonderful people and such a beautiful partnership be shared.
So beautiful. In fact, I think of Christian Sea as kind of a cult hero in the surfing growing world. It's a small niche, but I kind of think of him akin to Fergal Smith in Ireland. He's doing very kind of similar things, but just a full-on waterman and capable in so many incredible ways. It's astounding. But when we asked him to join us on the podcast, we asked if he'd be interested. He said yes, but then he went away for a few days and he came back and he said, I've been thinking about it, and I really wouldn't be who I am without Ka'ale. And so I'd be more comfortable if we could do this conversation together with her. And I just was so stoked, because I know we both appreciate hearing the intricacies of a beautiful partnership, especially of people who have taken risks together and taken risks as a family. So it was such a delight to have Ka'ale there, even though and you can hear this in the conversation, they're such different personalities. They're so different. And Ka'ale probably would have been really happy not to have spoken, semi-publicly about her experiences at all. That's just not, it doesn't seem like the person that she aspires to be in any way. But I think you can get a sense for how beautifully they complement one another. And you see that on the land there at Nulankala. It's just the most beautiful place to spend time. It's really an adventurer's retreat. We went to the sort of 5-star eco-resort place that Christian and Ka'ale used to work at, where they sort of cut their teeth in Sumba. And then we went and stayed at their place, and there's really no comparison. It's just so full of love and heart, built by hand, stone by stone, and you feel that when you're there. It's a place made for play and a place that invites you outside to explore every moment.
It seems as though Indonesia is full of ideas. Lots of people have different ideas that are being put into practice when it comes to places to stay, how to live, how to holiday, how to escape westernized, industrialized places, sanitized, rigid places. And there are a lot of different versions of that happening throughout Indonesia. And Christian and Kale's place, Nulankala, has a feel that feels like it could grow in a very healthy way for a very long period of time. And I don't mean grow as in get bigger. I mean grow within loving limits each year, like a beautiful garden. And it feels like a beautiful garden of a place that just happens to have a few spots for people to sleep as well, rather than so many places that are predominantly about the human and the human's space to dwell. And then you just happen to have a little garden out the back that maybe makes a few greens for the salads for the restaurant. And you happen to maybe do a couple things with replanting coral on the reef or something as a side thought. That's a very popular combination for pretty radical resort spaces around the world to feel better about intruding on a space so radically. And I really enjoy that in Nulankala you feel the opposite of that. There are many systems in place that are bettering the soil, bettering the biodiversity of that location, and humans have a little piece in there but aren't such a dominant force.
It feels so healthy.
Really healthy.
I'm just thinking about those banana flour pancakes at breakfast specifically.
That is very healthy. Yeah, and all the cassava chips, and
so delicious.
Being able to walk around and just pop, passion fruits and eat them with the kids.
Fresh tamarind.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Really wonderful, and in so many ways like home. I felt like we were just really at home in this space because of that.
Yeah, and I saw you have a real sense of kinship with Christian too. That was really beautiful. I saw there was a manly acknowledgement of seeing eye to eye. That was really sweet. How was that for you?
I just want to hug him the whole time. I just felt real love and a brotherly love with Christian, and that ability to feel like a wild man, but in no way with machismo and bravado. And those have been sort of ideas that came from our parents' generation and before, was that if you were a wild man, you were generally probably a drinker and a smoker, a radical hunter, or in Australia, you're a hard bastard. In New Zealand, you're a hard man. You're hard and you're tough. You're really tough and you're self-sufficient and you can do everything on your own. And it's very unhealthy. And I think a lot of us who are my age and perhaps older saw our fathers, grandfathers, uncles suffer from that idea. And so it's really wonderful to feel like you can share time and space with another man that has that free and wild spirit and a strong, powerful body that's respected. You're not trashing it through drinking and smoking and whatever else, but is also loving and kind to his children and his partner, and is loving and kind and joking and looking at how they interact with other people's children. And to me, that's a huge indicator in the world for me in terms of connecting with other men, is how children respond to you. And when we got there, Minnow, who's pretty selective with who he goes off and spends time with, this is no judgment on any other man that Minnow's perhaps not wanted to hang out with, but it's just when we got there, and Uncle Christian was like, hey, I got these climbing trees, do you want to come see? He was off straight away. He went running with him and adventuring and just clicked. And then we were having tickle fights, and I wanted to tickle Uncle Christian, and he was laughing, and all the other kids were the same with him.
Yeah.
And I just love that. I see that as a really important thing to acknowledge as a man with other men, and where we're trying to do better each generation. We're trying to take a little further that which was passed on to us from our parents, our fathers, and I just love and acknowledge that about Christians. So when we got there and we felt that way, I was just psyched. I felt like, I could do anything with this fella. We could go anywhere and have a good time. And
speaking of children, through the conversation, you'll hear children wander in and nestle into the circle and have a few words and then wander out. So thanks for your patience there. That's just indicative of the set and the setting that we were in at the time, and part of the real juggle of parenting when you're on the road. What I saw with you and Christian was this beautiful sort of display of masculinity that, like water, is both soft but strong, but both at the same time. And that's so sweet to witness.
Yeah, it's kind. So great. And so hopefully first of many adventures together and visits to that beautiful space, and encourage people who have these kind of interests or who perhaps feel a little vulnerable when thinking about going somewhere like that. Do it. Just lean into that and go for it and do that. Just that vibrant edge is really apparent with both people and place there.
I was lucky to get to have a session in the water with Ka'ale when the wind had come up a little bit on shore, and she had just gotten over a little injury, and we just sat at the bottom of those beautiful, beautiful cliffs in the deep blue water, and we were swapping waves. And she's just such a gentle but also strong,
rolling
charging
wave.
surfer. Yeah. So it's such a pleasure to get to know her. I definitely felt the real sister kinship there as well. And like you said, I hope we get back there really soon, but without all the medical drama.
Through the conversation and also through the time shared there with everyone, I really felt a wonderful balance of idealism and, great ideas, concepts, but put into practice. And I love that there is evidence of that all over that hillside there and that location, with various stages of systems of food and land reparation, cultural blending, and all these wonderful ideas in action. Then through conversation, I really feel that happens too, where there's an ability to think really big and wide thoughts, and then to zoom in on really specific applications of those thoughts and ideas. And I like that about this conversation. I actually feel this is one that I could listen to and should listen to like a great book. You want to read it each year. I'd listen to this every year just to have a reminder to have great ideas and to have the courage to put them into practice, and to do so through our interests, which is the same as theirs, is growing food, being gentle and kind with each other, ourselves, our children, our soil, our local waters and air. And those are all such wonderful aspects to having a vibrant life right on that edge of things.
So we always begin the podcast by asking about a time or experience after which you were never the same. Do you have a time like that, either together or separately, that you'd be willing to share?
I think after every moment, you're never the same. But for me, before there was Ka'ale and I together, I was a young 5-year-old or 6-year-old or something, and I was in a hospital ward with linoleum floors and a squeaky gurney trolley going down the corridor, and I just remember the fluorescent lights of the sterility of the area. And I was a kid, and I was holding onto my dad's hand, and I just remember his body was just like nearly gone. He was nearly limp. And I remember him saying, you got to live it. Like, just give it your all. It ended up being a nightmare. And it was told from the eyes of my kid holding onto my hand. I was on my deathbed. From that day on, I was going to go full on in this life and give it my best. And I think that was really a driving force for me. From that day on, I was like, we were living on a boat. I was just really into homeschooling and getting smart. And I was really into, of course, the ocean, because that's your bathtub and your playground and everything, really. So I think sparked in me just like a really put it all on the line, do good, be good, go far. And
was that a dream?
Yeah, it was a dream. That was a dream. Yeah. And it was something I remember so vividly. I was shocked out of the wake up, woken up out of this. I can feel it now, almost like clammy hands, like holding my dad's hands. And yeah, it was all a dream. And it was all just like telling me to just enjoy your life and go as far as you can, do as much as you can. And I think in all of that, just, who my parents were too. They were really, they loved their freedom. They're hippies and, gone through the whole, just missed the beatnik movement. And they were in the hippies. My mom had hitchhiked around Europe and we learned about life that way. And she knew what she wanted. And she knew that she couldn't go back to life on the East Coast as a normal human. And she had a high school sweetheart, David, who she sailed away to the Caribbean with, and that's how we grew up. And so our life was very much intertwined along the sea, in the sea, spearing before was surfing, or probably just after I was swimming, maybe before I was swimming, because you kind of put the flippers on and you float. And so much easier, I think, when you put your mask on and look down and look around to forget that you're actually swimming. And that was the beginning of a new appreciation for life for me, I think. Just this freakish nightmare that was clear as day, that your kid was going to be seeing you die early, and that because of that, maybe you can live your life in a way that that maybe you wouldn't die early. Maybe you can just, go for a lot longer if you live a certain way. So it made me kind of think that way.
Has it haunted you, that dream?
No, it was like a one and done. But I remember it vividly, but not haunted. It was just like, never ever had a nightmare that pure and real and true. And it wasn't like back in the days where like you saw some movie and then the movie made you have a nightmare, zombies or whatever. This is just like, it came like the beautiful things of like intuition. Yeah, that experience of like being sent info from somewhere else that can direct your path.
Yeah.
And that was the moment that changed my life, I think, the most.
How old were you when you had
5, I think.
Yeah. Oh, you were 5. Okay.
7, something, like our younger kids' ages.
Wow.
And I remember that one vividly. And
I would say it's definitely, you took it to heart by the way that I've seen you live over the last 24 years.
Yeah.
Getting up, going, nonstop.
Did you see your dad doing that too? Or your mom?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They loved every minute.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
I remember being around that age too, and hitchhiking up into Blue Mountain in Tortola. Our boat was parked in Game Garden Bay, and we'd hitchhike up. And where are we going, Mom? And don't worry, it's gonna be cool. And you go up, and you're in the mist all of a sudden, and get dropped off from your hitchhiking ride, and start walking through the cow field. What are we doing? She's like, just look for the little mushrooms. It's like a little bit of purple when you clip them, and like, okay. took us collecting mushrooms as kids. And then they'd go back to the boat and, we'd be going surfing or diving or something. And just mom and dad would have these super fun days where they're just laughing their hearts out. And that was the kind of freedom I grew up with, and around them. And David was a really amazing woodworker and wooden boat builder. And so it gave him the freedom to go anywhere he wanted to.
Wow.
And he could sail, so the fuel was free. So, and my mom was a body worker and a healer, as well as like a master's in special education of the handicapped. And and then she was really gifted in body work and moved into, after I was born, moved into midwifery and into birthing children all over the world. So they were definitely connected to the source.
Wow.
Yeah.
Christian is like a spitting image of his mom, but in the male version.
Wow. Is she still around? Are your parents still around?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, she was here last week.
Ah.
She'll probably be back this week.
Are they
a
still
couple
on
days
a-
actually, just missing her.
Are they still on a boat?
No.
No.
A lot's happened since then.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
Wow.
But she's still wild and free and traveling the world doing her thing. My father passed away from a gnarly parasite, really, in Hawaii. Rat lungworm. Pretty scary experience for everyone there that has to go through that. Yeah. And Ka'ale, how about together? Do you have one that you think?
The one that popped up in my mind that I would say is when you proposed to me. When we were in Nakamo, in the Tuamotu Islands, like I had come down to meet Christian there. He was looking after a sailboat, and I had to mission down bringing some veggies and things, and I landed on the little island, or the little atoll from Tahiti. I flew from Tahiti in a small plane, and then this crazy dentist guy picked me up in this Jeep and bumped us around, and I jumped on this little boat, and they sped us through the, 14 kilometers was the inside area of the atoll, and then Christian was anchored right at this little pass at the other side of the island. And so then when I got out, I was like in the whirlwind and traveling for like 2 days, and then he just came out in the little lei that he made out of the Hoya flower or something, this like beautiful flower that we ended up having here on this property down by our beautiful yoga platform over here, this really special flower.
Yeah.
Oh, Jahaya, yeah.
Pink
It
with
smells
white.
so nice.
Is
It's white and it's little.
that
And it smells so good. And it became really special to us because of this trip. In Nakamo, they had those plants all around. And we used to use the leaves as plates to eat on, and then those flowers. So that's the
Right
lei
here,
that he
too.
brought me out. So I just remember when I landed on the boat and he was walking out, and this like just beautiful coral reefs, atolls. It was just the most amazing like dream. I was like, oh my gosh, where are we? And then the next day, this whole crew of people went down to another atoll to do some documentary on sharks, and we were staying on there to look after the sailboat. And so while we were there, one sunset, which he thought was his birthday, but it was the day before his birthday. He got the days mixed up. I had his birthday
I was
presents
excited.
I had his birthday presents all wrapped up. I had brought him with, because he had been gone for a while in New Zealand and stuff, and so brought some birthday presents, and I wasn't saying anything that day, and he was like, what is going on? But then we got to sunset, and yeah, he just popped the question, and it was such a surprise, because I had not even fathomed getting married, actually, in my life. It wasn't ever a big dream of mine, or didn't feel like it was very important to me, because I felt like it was paperwork and blah, 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 this, such and such, that if you love someone, you should love someone. Why do you have to, do all this legal documents and things like that? That was my take. But then, so I was quiet for a while, speechless. He's like, blah, blah. I started trying to explain, and then, I was like, yes. And then we just had such a beautiful time on that island, and then, that was the beginning we called my dad on the satellite phone that they had down there. Christian wanted to get permission to do it a little bit traditionally.
Aww.
And then, so that was really sweet. And then I would say, from then on, we've been together, ever since. So that was, I don't know what year, but 24 years ago.
I heard there was presence-inducing shark encounters during your time in the Tuamotus. Is that true?
As there always will be in the Tuamotus, I think, or hopefully there always will be. Yeah. For me, it was, by population anyway, the sharkiest place I'd ever been. And I remember...
Sharks. Little reef sharks, not too big.
Paddling a canoe, a kayak, plastic kayak, just across the little pass there, and having the sharks like whack, and just come up behind you and just hit you and just like kind of try and taste you, and they're just little, like 6 foot, 8 foot reef sharks, and, hitting the kayak, but they're really inquisitive, and they do have teeth, and in a pack they could finish you off pretty easy, I think. One time I was swimming across the. I had timed it. We'd been there about 2 or 3 weeks, and the sailing boat that we were looking after was on the other side of the pass. We were staying in this little campground that this really beautiful French and Tahitian guide had set up, where they kind of hosted people a little bit and kind of made sure they didn't get eaten by sharks. But they were gone on the other atoll, and it was just us taking care of the campground, and every day we had to kind of go over to the boat and check it out. And I'd been diving up and down there with the Tahitian guide, Tuare. And instead of taking the little Zodiac over to check the boat, one day I was like, honey, it's like slack tide. It's clear water. I got it all figured out. Right when the tide eases up, I'm going to swim over. I'm going to check the boat, and then I'm going to swim back. And I luckily brought the 3-prong and had my long freediving fins, and was swimming across. It was maybe 300 meters the pass wide, and got within about 70, 80 meters of the other side, just perfectly peaceful. You could see, as 200 feet deep, just as far as you could see the bottom. And I remember seeing, like, as I got close to the other side at about like 150 feet or something, just this mob of sharks start to decide they were going to come at me. And it was like, looking at like this Medusa, like comet thing heading at you, and they're all like going in and out of each other. And I'm like, whoa, they're coming in pretty hot. And I'm like, kicking a little bit harder, trying to get to the other side. And I'm probably only like 20 meters from the other side. And they just absolutely assailed me, like maybe 6 or 7 gray reef sharks in the 6 to 8 foot range. And I was luckily had the 3-prong, so I could like poke the first one, and then I had them slapping them, kicking them. I had a bite out of my free dive fin, and they were I was just rolling all around. You couldn't tell anything. It was just elbows. It was like the gnarliest fight I've ever been in my life, and definitely a lot of contact going on. But they didn't get a tooth in me somehow, and I was right up against the edge of the reef now, and it's like 2 feet out of the water. Just climbed up wherever, the fingery coral, super sharp fire coral, just climb right up, and they're still there trying to like get at me. And wow, that was the stupidest thing I ever did. In the middle of nowhere with my fiance on the other side, I'm like, yeah.
So are you watching this royal of ocean? Okay.
I can go. I'm just going to swim over because I can. And I knew it was super sharky there. When you speared a fish, you would just leave it there and get in the boat and pull the fish up, so that there was no chance of a shark coming and mistaking your hand for the fish or your fish for the hand. So it was a very healthy ecosystem.
So beautiful.
And I made it to the other side, and I think I must have whistled for Kale to bring the Zodiac over, because I sure as heck wasn't swimming back the other way after that. And
wow.
That was the beginning of our...
I remember standing on the edge of that reef, and the shark would just come right up, like on the side. I don't know if somebody ever
could see you.
Yeah, they would just peek up like that. You're like, whoa, hello, because it was such a drop off. It just went straight down to the channel.
Wow.
And then when we were spearfishing around, of course, like you said, you just had to put the fish in, and you could pretty much had to move the whole location after one fish.
Yep.
You couldn't even stay like in the general vicinity, because then there would be so many around. And then when we went scuba diving one time right along the maybe we went scuba diving to see them. I can't remember, but I have never seen so many sharks in my life. There's like 500 sharks in the channel during the current, while the current was going
Incoming.
in. Yeah. And they were all resting, like just sleeping there, and so the water is pushing their gills so that they can actually rest. They don't have to swim. And so
they're gliding.
But they're like gliding slowly. They're just resting.
Circles.
And then they kind of once in a while go swim from the front around to the back and get back on the thing and just kind of cruise along. And I guess that's keeping their gills moving like they need to. And we were just holding on. I think we were like sharing one tank or something.
Octopus,
We just had so we were just like creeping down along, like tucked in by the reef, looking all of these sharks. And I have one photo of it somewhere, just like we must have had like some little disposable camera or something, one of those underwater ones. And it's like just shows all these dots. And yeah, I've scuba dive a lot all around quite a few places in the world. I mean, for years I was dive master, dive instructor, and going different places, and I've never seen that. That was like amazing.
It makes me think about shifting baselines in the ocean. How if you look back at the early accounts of European explorers, you hear them talk about the ocean being filled with hundreds or thousands of turtles and schools of fish, and just such a different oceanic experience than what we have now. And it sounds like you got to experience a little taste of that. That's pretty.
Yeah, and here we are. Here we are on the other end of the spectrum now. We're on the spectrum here in Indonesia, where there's no fishing regulations per se, and shark finning is technically maybe illegal at the moment, but there's no enforcement, and it's ongoing very much so. And you could swim 6-7 miles here out to sea, and you wouldn't see a shark. And you can spear a fish, and the shark will never come to your spear and bother your fish or anything like that. It's just
Hello, good morning.
Good morning. We heard this is your earliest podcast ever.
Yeah. It's good. I like it.
Ka'ale, you mentioned that you had a lot of experience diving, scuba diving. Can you talk us through where that passion for being underwater came from, and where your early water experiences were seated?
Oh, well, gosh, definitely didn't come from my family. I'm the first water person of my family.
Wow.
But when I was about 17, one of my closest girlfriends and I decided to go traveling. So she had come back from Australia. She was like 15, and she went to visit an uncle in Australia, and she's like, oh my gosh, we have to go. Come on, let's save our money and let's go back down there. It's so much fun. And so we started working, and her parents were really supportive. They were kind of some people that we call hanai in Hawaii. I kind of adopted as my kind of family when I was a teenager. They were they were really supportive of me at that time, and they had 2 girls, one just below me and one just above, so I was in the middle. And so they said, okay, sure, we'll match whatever you guys save, then we'll give you the double. And so before we went, she said, oh, you have to get your scuba diving, because she got her diving license in the Great Barrier Reef. So I just, I was so afraid. I thought it was going to be like suffocating under there. But actually, when you went down and had a look, it was so expansive, and it was so beautiful that it was just like instantly there was just no fear at all. I mean, when we were in the pool, it felt a bit weird. It was like kind of like crowded and whatnot, but then as soon as you got to the ocean, it was just so amazing, full of life and color and all the corals and fish, that I just totally fell in love with it. Right there, I did instantly they convinced me to do my advance, so we went to the other side of the island, back to back, and did the deep dive on the Kona side. And then when we got out there traveling, we were in Nepal for a couple of months, and then we went down to Thailand, to Koh Tao, and I ended up meeting this sweet dive instructor, Kong. And we did our rescue dive with them, and we did a trade. So we painted their boat and, got exchanged for stay and food, and kind of hung out around that little dive shop for a while. And then when I went to Australia, to Byron Bay, I did a trade there as well for my dive masters. And then I was working out at Julian Rocks, taking people diving. And And then finally, when I went back to Hawaii, I got my instructors. I had worked in Kona for a while on the dive boats there, and they were waiting for a instructor. So they said, okay, they'll wait for me to finish up the course that was happening in a couple months. And I finished the course on like a Friday, and then that same girl that we went traveling with, Pandi, called me, and she's like, hey, they need somebody on the sailboat. Do you want to come down? So I went to the guys that I was working for his dive shop, and I said, oh, Doug, I'm so sorry. Like I said, my friend was calling me to come down to Tahiti to go on this sailboat. I'm supposed to start on Monday as his instructor that he's been waiting for. And I said, oh, he's like, all right, go for it. I would be disappointed if you didn't go, he's like, do it. And so then I just got all my stuff up and I jumped on, said, off I went down to there to the next adventure on that big boat. So we were in French Polynesia for a while down there. And the owner didn't come on much, but when he did come on, I would drop them off. We would just go exploring and dive wherever we were. It was really amazing.
How old were you then?
22.
22. And you grew up in a homeschool setting as well.
Yes.
And so do you feel like that empowered you with a sense of freedom and curiosity to follow those callings that were so different from your familial lineage?
Yeah, perhaps. I mean, I don't know what would have been different, if I had gone to like a traditional school, but I know that the homeschool was a really supportive place, and it was my mom with like 4 other parents, so we would meet down at a schoolhouse and have about 20 children, so I wasn't alone in the home. So it felt actually like a little bit of a school environment, and it was really fun. So yeah, I'm not sure if that shaped me to feel freedom, but I think for me, I just needed to get away at that age, at 17, and my friend was supportive of that, and I needed to go and explore and discover who I was away from the small community and the family things, and just wanted to set out and, see what was going on out there and discover my inner self, kind of a thing, like find who I was without the structure of my family and without the structure of the community that was around me. And so off we went.
And so when do your parallel tales entwine? Can you tell us about when and where you met?
Hawaii, back in Hawaii, after the sailboat.
And after I'd lived in Western Australia, India, and traveled, came home to the Big Island, and we had maybe briefly made acquaintances before that, like
True. When I was working on the dive shop on the other side of the island, I first spotted Christian. I came back to my side of the island surfing, so we met in the water pretty much. But, yeah.
Great.
I was lifeguarding at Honolulu Beach Park, which is like the last wave on the Hilo side of Hawaii.
Oh, so beautiful.
And I would sitting in the tower one day, and you get your hour of training a day. So we'd usually, as lifeguards at a surf break, you'd go surfing, and there's this beautiful young wahine out there surfing and shredding, and and just such a regal air about you in the water in general. And I had a good session. I came in, and the guy I was working with, Kahea, I said, Kahea, there's this girl out there. She's so beautiful. And he's like, let me see, which one? And he grabs a binocular, he's checking her out, typical lifeguard, preventative action stuff. And he's like, oh, that's Ka'ale. That's my wife's best friend. It's like, I'll for sure put in a good word for you. And I think as I was driving away that day or that session or another one shortly thereafter, I had I've always been the guy who kind of grew big papayas for some reason. And I know the secret. And I'm driving away, and I'm like, would you like, she's walking up the stairs with her boy, and I'm like, would you like a papaya? She's like, sure. And that was one of the beginnings. There was several beginnings. But once the flame was lit, man, we went camping, and basically lived on the top of my truck. I had a hard shell for the back of a pickup, and I would park it wherever I was going to work lifeguarding the next day and just sleep on the roof under the stars, usually, or with friends if it wasn't great weather. But I would just usually park down on the lava flow somewhere and go spear a couple of fish before dinner, and we just connected, and we went for like a 5-day camping mission just around her home coast, and yeah, it was pretty inseparable since then.
How old were you when you met?
24 and 25. Yeah.
And I think we had both done a lot of self-discovery via travel or meditation, yoga. We'd both dove quite deep in, who we are and what made us tick. And that at least allowed us to be able to move through difficulties, I think, better than most people would move through in their relationships. We realized that there was this whole other side. There was a whole way of talking with your mind and trying to, focus the mind and the meditation aspects and
to be individuals, as well as like in a relationship, right? It's like so that you're
really solid
have a lot
individuals.
of freedom to be who you are, but also come back together.
Christian, it seems like you had modeling for that sort of relationship in your upbringing, just from what you said earlier. Ka'ale, I was wondering, did you see that sort of respectful together but also separate entity kind of relationship modeled for you? Or was it something you were dreaming up as it was happening?
My parents were divorced, so I don't know if I really had the healthy model that I would have wished for.
Yeah.
And then I had the stepfather that I didn't really ever adapt to as a father, which I would have preferred to have that stepfather step in, because I believe they can,
Yeah.
My Hanai family was like that. It was a stepfather, but that was their dad, They were very close too, so I don't feel like it has to be blood that, connects you. But for me, it wasn't such a model, no. Something I found my way with, for sure.
Were you all in Hawaii then for a while before leaving the islands?
So not too long. Hey, I was just finishing up. I went back to a quick course of university at that point. That's what kind of drove me back to Hawaii, was to get further my education a bit. And Christian had just finished, right, your marine biology degree. So I was maybe on my last year. And then, probably, what would you say, 3 or 4 years, perhaps? 4 years before we came down. We got proposed to in Tahiti, or in French Polynesia, a year before we were married, and we got married in 2005. So I got back to Hawaii from the boat around, we spent 2000 in Fiji. I remember the year 2000. I was in Fiji. 2001, I think I came back to Hawaii. And that's when you had just moved in. So I left at 18 from Hilo, and he moved in at 18. So that's why our paths, that's why he knew some of the community that I knew, but I had not, met. So we did our farm though. We found some land and we started a farm. We're just camping and growing big papayas. We had big papayas there too.
What a thread. What a beautiful thread running through life.
We always have big papayas.
We shortly after we got married, we had one of our best friends who was leaving the islands to move to the Mentawais, and he offered us a good deal on a piece of land that was raw Hawaiian jungle. And I begged and borrowed and worked as hard as I could to get the chunk of cash I needed to pay him for that land. And then we started with 3 acres in Ililoa, and that was a Hawaiian village on the Puna Coast in Opihikau. It was overgrown with
it was old forest,
70, 80 foot tall breadfruit trees, wild avocado trees, guava, vivy, all kinds of weed trees. And you could walk in and see the ancient terraces that the Hawaiians had used there. They had ancient stone pig pens where they would throw the excess food in because it's such an abundant place, and raise their pigs in these stone corrals. And it was a village famous for its lauhala, its pandanus weaving at one point. We decided that it connected with us big time, and we went in by hand and started clearing it and deciphering where the ancient terraces were.
First we camped there. Remember, we went to ask permission, to see if we could be there. So we slept there at night to just feel it out and check in and, make a promise that we were like stewards of the land, and just okay if we're here kind of a thing, because it's so powerful there. You can really tell that Hawaii can take you in or spit you out,
Yes,
It felt good. It was such a good, clear energy there, eh?
Yeah.
And
was
you were
really
coming
welcoming.
in as someone who is schooled in traditional ways of communicating with land and understanding the spiritual traditions of Hawaiian culture.
True, I had just finished a bit of the Hawaiian Studies program that was new at the University of Hawaii that they had created. So
Yeah.
I was just finishing up in that systems, and I guess I had, it might have made me feel a lot more connected to them perhaps too. I never thought of that.
So you weren't, by the sound of things, that schooled and versed in land care, or were you? Were there parts of your life before that you were calling on when you started getting in there by hand and tending those trees and those spaces, or was it just a daily education?
I think the nature of that place is the nature of like a frontier kind of environment. The people that are attracted to there and then that place attracts are the people that don't want to live a conventional life, that don't want to sign on the mortgage contract, that don't want to be put onto a pension plan at the end of their careers kind of thing. They're just going to live it to the fullest, maybe do without in some things and be more abundant in other things. And our little, tribe down there, we're ocean people, beautiful village of ocean people down there. We all centered around originally it was a wave called Kalapana. It was the best south swell waves in all Hawaii. It was a kind of a secret. The guys on the North Shore would go to Kalapana for the summer and surf beautiful, big, powerful south swell waves. And that got covered years earlier. And then it became focused on this area called Pohuiki, which had a boat ramp and a really thriving tuna fisheries for small little boats, like a recreational, recreational, if you will, tuna fisheries and waves. And there was some people there that kind of just became, of course the Hawaiians were there for centuries. There was some, of us Hawaiians intertwined and really interested in learning from the Hawaiians and interested in learning how to dive and fish and surf. And the volcano you can see every night from this area. You can see the glow of the volcano. So Pele's presence is always very, very powerful and really ruling that area. And I didn't have any real experience in doing that, although my parents did that. They moved off a sailboat when I was 12 to a raw piece of land, cleared it and built, over years, a bunch of shacks, and it turned into a very nice house. And
Where was that?
that was in St. Thomas in the United States Virgin Islands. I had a brother drown when I was, I think, 11. He was probably 4. He was resuscitated, but my mother found him like 40, 50 feet floating off the back of our houseboat at that point. And she had been a lifeguard at the pools in North Carolina in the summers and had learned CPR and had resuscitated my brother Theo, brought him back to life. I'm coming home from school. They're rushing out in the dinghy. Theo drowned. We're taking him to the hospital to check his lungs. And that was the beginning of not living on boats anymore because there was a younger brother below him. So he moved onto land on the North Shore of St. Thomas, Hull Bay, and carved out this raw piece of land. So the idea wasn't foreign for me. And when we got gifted this raw piece of land in Hawaii, I think what's interesting now in retrospect that we know so much more about permaculture, have been so much more educated in that. Like the thing that we were really strong in was the principle of observation, observe and interact. So like Ka'alemalu said, we went there and we just camped, just put the tent in the forest. So many mosquitoes, you wouldn't believe it. Like, hiking, maybe, 50, 100 meters to the truck and finding this kind of a hill in the back, a natural hill, and camping on that hill and really listening to the land and the nature and being in all the different times of the day. And also, over probably several months we were doing that and working by hand as opposed to what the common thing there is to bring in a D9 bulldozer and bulldoze what they call pin to pin. So just all the boundaries of your land, you just bulldoze and push everything back to the edges. And so you have this clean slate. It's a real modern way of thinking about, land use, modern, but in a really strange way. And we did the opposite of the structure was here, the people were living here before us. Let's just uncover that and think about what they were doing. The breadfruit trees that we're growing here, let's pollard those and try and make them pickable so that we can get them, and the ones that are too big to handle, we can use the wood and we can make something and put a piece of tin up and catch rainwater so you don't have to be hauling water, and just figuring out how to, recycle our human waste and, all of our compost in a way that made the papayas grow bigger. And
there was no electricity or running water down there at the land where there was, where we were. So you had to, if you wanted to be, have a shower or somewhat be comfortable, just have to do that, as well as, I don't know where the belief in that type of living came from, but I feel like we didn't have a lot of money. I was with a single mom for a while, and we lived quite simply, but I was also in nature, growing up in Hawaii. I was just always in nature. And so I think I just always felt like connected or could communicate with the forest or, feel the essence of it. So it just always made sense to love it, and for it that it's that's a part of us, it never, didn't really feel different, like it's something outside, So I think at an early age, I just played in the mango trees. We had mango trees and I was always in there, and it just, so that's where my mom wasn't she was propagating a little bit. She was,
I shot out of the blankets and I'm already freezing.
Oh, boy.
come on, keep you warm.
Your dad has got layers on. He'll definitely keep you warm.
Are you cold?
Hi. Nothing like a good warm human body to warm you up, huh?
But my mom had a little garden, and she was actually growing marijuana at the time in the 70s as a single mother. She had a little bit of that going on by our house, so we would help her sometimes in the garden there. But she also had a veggie garden, and she was quite ill. She had lupus, and so it became really important to her. And so for me at a young age, that growing, having healthy food to eat meant being healthy. Yeah. So she embarked upon this journey when I was about 2 years old, that she went to a completely vegan diet and no pesticides. And she had to, not that I'm a strong believer in vegan diet or anything, but it was just that at that time, all the hormones and things that were in the meat her body wasn't accepting, and it would give her a lot of inflammation and make her be in bed, for days. And so she had to, find a way. The medical doctors couldn't really offer her anything at that time. So she met a naturopathic doctor, and then she became, just dedicated and religious about making her carrot juice every day and, having some healthy food for all of us to eat. And so that was, instilled at a young age to have that kind of food available.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. It makes me think about going back a touch to the tenting it on the land that...
what are you guys doing?
We're recording a conversation with your amazing parents. Yeah. Because we help tell people stories.
Or is it a podcast made by real people?
Yeah. Flesh and blood.
That's it.
Hair and bones. That's us.
Can you,
all of us.
While we do this, can you listen?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Try not to talk too much because we're in a flow that's recording.
Yeah.
What you say is always really important, but just for this, we don't have too much time to get it done, so they can do what we need to do, okay?
Okay.
Okay. Listen.
Nice.
Thanks, Layla.
Thanks for your support, little one. That time tenting it in the bush, we can relate to that. That was when we first got together. We spent nearly 4 years in a little cabin I built with a friend in the bush. Same thing, no power, no hot water, just a tank off the side of the tin roof for water. And I know for Lauren it was a huge change coming from suburban Florida. And for me, it kind of was too. But it felt like such a reset. It just felt like, okay, what are the things that we truly need and value? What do we really feel inspired by? What is really important, considering we both grew up with televisions in the house, parents doing the best they could in the 80s, and, feeding your kids with frozen veggies from the supermarket.
Lots of packaged food.
Yeah, everything
Lots
was
of
in
fast
plastic.
food.
like they're doing, both our families, they're doing the best they could, though it was a time perhaps where it was a very industrialized way of living. So it's really cool to hear that you all had that experience there, though you have really run with it too, obviously, considering where we're sitting right now and what you all have dreamed up in this place. When you were there, did you have a feeling that as that was happening and you were clearing the space, did you have a feeling that you wanted to go further with that experience? Were there little seeds planted in both of you that you just knew you wanted to water and grow in a further way than just that space there?
I do remember that we planted all of our trees before we built anything. We were living in tents in our, orchards at that time, as we called them. Maybe more agroforestry systems nowadays, now that we know more. But our orchards were planted so that by the time we were in the house and maybe had kids, we could be eating off of those trees. And then we went and built a very simple structure. I think that really it all just happened so organically because, we're just on a shoestring budget, whatever I could make working for the county. And what were you doing? Substitute? No, you were lifeguarding as well.
I was just
lifeguarding as well.
part-time. I was still in
So
school.
everything just happens organically and slowly. And in that way, you have a lot of time to think about it, I think. And also just taking yourself out of that system, of like,
Dad.
owing the bank. And, it allows you a lot of freedom to go and discover the ocean, discover the surf when it's happening, go get fish when it's not happening. And that connects you directly to your food chain and the real food chain. And I think that going slow was a really great thing for us, having to go slow and starting from nothing. And really, like you said, when you're living in that way, it's everything becomes a systems thinking approach to looking at life, right? Like you said, your water tank, okay, so that's a really important system because if you don't have water, there's no biological life on Earth, and we don't live. And if you have bad water, then you're not feeling good and you can't go surf. And then there's everywhere in between. So, and then there's Lauren, you like to work at night. You need light, right? So then there's like, okay, what kind of solar light setup do you have? And what else is drawing power? Sure is nice to have a fridge so you can have a little almond milk or something like that.
And not moldy food.
Yeah, your food lasts a little bit longer. So that's how we've learned to approach off the grid living is through that systems thinking approach. And that first project in Hawaii has brought us a lot of knowing that we can do it because we went through those years of figuring it out and figuring out like best practice. And there's a lot of people in our area that are living off the grid. So, it's really easy to find a guy who's a solar expert. It's really easy to find a guy who's a water catchment expert. It's really easy to find, to see plenty of people that aren't and, living under tarps and, doing what they can to survive for,
It's true.
Whatever reason. And so we had this really odd 10-year sabbatical working for a 5-star eco retreat down the way and learning about hospitality, which she had some experience in, but I hadn't really ever been in that industry. And neither of us had ever run a business or really neither of us had lived in any one place for like 10 years. And so,
not since childhood.
So after 10 years in Sumba, we knew the language, we knew the beautiful culture that's here, the Marapu people, the Marapu religion, animist religion. We knew the ocean here and all of its intricacies, which is one of the most, because of the tidal shifts here, it's one of the most difficult places to figure out and anywhere I've ever lived. But it does have, the surf isn't, the wave energy is always there. You're just trying to tune in the other energy. The tidal energy and the wind energy, so you can be there at the right moment. And we had figured that all out. And really, I think Hawaii I'd always had the dream in Hawaii of of doing what we did and having a couple cabins that we could rent and like Airbnb it and go down to the beach and surf and then come back and like clean the houses and get ready for the next, the next. So that was always kind of my vision of having a couple bungalows in some way that we made our living off of.
And for me, it was like having somebody come to the land and that we could like actually invite into that way of living. And we thought of being able to have them teach them yoga or to take a walk through the garden or to be able to pick their own food and we would cook it for them or something like, we had kind of had the little idea, little seed somewhere that would be a really beautiful thing to offer, as well as down there you're always being creative in way to make a living. So we thought that it would just be so beautiful to be able to share that, life with people, like that lifestyle with people. So for me, when we came over here, it was not a big vision or a plan like you had asked before. It was kind of life bringing us here. But for me, it has always really been about having people at our home. This is like, it's gotten quite big now compared to how we would have ever imagined it. But that was always the essence that drove me, was having people come and share this kind of beautiful life, healthy food, and that's what feeds me. It's not being a hotel owner or something like that. That to me is like the essence of what made me feel like good, because in the beginning we were really in the middle and people were coming right across our front doorstep there to where we were staying with our children, and that felt good, people coming here and then us being able to share this place and food and things that we created.
The aloha spirit.
Yeah,
that's what I hear.
The aloha spirit.
It's you bringing the aloha spirit.
True.
To share.
And they're almost like each visit for those of us who come to visit are like those shorter but potent resets for people too. I'm sure people have, I'm sure you see, or do you see people over the years have epiphanies while they're here and they go, you know what, I need to sort my shit out on this level or that level. Is that something you've witnessed?
For sure.
I think they for sure see that there's a simpler way, that there's a lot that they can do without. And I think Ka'ale she's been putting so much energy for so many years into integrating what we grow here at Nolankala and what grows here around us in our community into the menu in a way that's healthy and primarily vegetarian based and really like how we've been eating forever, but she's turned that into a menu for our guests that come. And we will get, groups of Aussie builder, conventional blokes through and they'll be on a vegetarian diet for like 7 or 10 days on a surf trip. And they're excited about it. They're like, I don't think I ever ate one vegetarian meal before I came here. And now it's like, I got to go home and figure out how to do this. And can you make a cookbook? Like, they get really excited. They get really excited about, the vegetarian thing is a huge shift in people's thinking and your energy. And also, I don't think that Westerners realize how much hormones and how much antibiotics are going into their food, and then that directly affects their bodies and of course, their mind and their thinking. And so not only from an environmental standpoint, but just from a health standpoint, and how those animals are farmed and what's going into them to get them growing quickly. And it's a big scary thing, but
this place does offer people a lot of space, and that connection with nature. So I think naturally people will begin to dive deep, like you had asked before. It just offers that support for people because they can stay disconnected from the internet and they can have a little more time away from the busyness of shops or having to decide which restaurant to go to or whatnot, so it really does just naturally and automatically, allow people to just have a little space and time, to connect with themselves and those questions that might be in there, but not having space or time or, whatever to connect with. So for sure, part of our intention, I remember setting in the beginning, was offering that for people. That was a big thing because we know that it's so healthy, and then if they can take that back to their families, blah blah blah, it spreads, so but also was something in the beginning about making it comfortable enough, but also happy that it could push people out of their comfort level as well, you know, like that was like a little like, oh, should we put a cushion there or not? You know, like it's just kind of a thing. It's like, and also because it naturally just progresses that way. You start with you're on the rocks and then you know, move up. But at the same time, it was always kind of like, yeah, but this is a good thing, you know, for people to have that, feel that little edge, you know, we don't want it to be too far, but also at the same time, it's super nice for people to get to feel that kind of balance of, you know, oh, wait a second, this is different. And
I've so been appreciating exactly what you were saying, Ka'ale. The removal of infinite choice. We often conceive of freedom as sort of infinitely expansive and a sign of progress to have all these freedoms, to be able to eat tomatoes in any season and, you know, to be able to have 50 choices on a menu. You know, we see that as like this pinnacle of having it all, success.
Yeah.
But actually, there's also deep freedom in just accepting what is here right now, what is seasonal, what is available, what is nourishing. And maybe that's an under-respected aspect of limiting choice.
Yeah.
I don't know where I'm going with that, but I was just experiencing that, being served a beautiful meal at this communal table here at Nalankala and being so grateful for the alive food that you all serve after having been traveling for a few weeks and eating a lot of, you know, food that feels not connected to a living system. So yeah, I'm so grateful for that. And it just has rekindled that appreciation for the beauty of not having choice sometimes.
it does bring a lot of gratitude. And that's a really nice thing because, yeah, like you said, tomatoes all year round. Okay, you have tomatoes all year round. There's another tomato. You know, but like, if you stop and you don't have tomatoes for a while, your next tomato is so yummy and so good, you know. It's like it brings the spiciness of life back when you have that kind of appreciation for things, or you take things away, you know. A hot shower. Oh my gosh, yes.
Oh, yeah. Please stay tuned while we take a quick break to acknowledge the folks who help make our podcast possible.
If the first 50 years were an experiment,
to prove that a business could be responsible
and successful,
turns out it's not just possible,
it's profitable.
So what's next?
What's next is simple. It's human-powered, and it's finding the joy in doing difficult things.
What's next is turning capitalism on its head and putting all our money where our mouth is. What's next is unstoppable.
Thanks to Patagonia for their continued support this season and for prioritizing purpose over profit to protect our wondrous planet, our only home. Sanuk has been advocating for a more playful and inclusive surfing culture for more than 2 decades while crafting some of the comfiest footwear around. Thanks for your support, Sanuk, and for encouraging water people around the globe to protect their happy places. Learn more about Sanuk's partnership with the Surfrider Foundation at sanuk.com. The people of this island, the Sudanese, are obviously skilled gardeners. You see it driving along the roads here, the papaya forest. There's a lot of food around. I was so curious to ask you about what's inspired you from the local culture. Is there anything about the culture here that made you want to stay besides just the surf and the wind?
Oh yeah, for sure. For sure. The surf is the gym. Kind of, it's like where we go to get the physicality, but really the land and the people are pure gold here. It's one of the most peaceful places I've ever lived. There's no guns, there's no drugs, there's no alcohol abuse. A few hundred years ago, it was still a matriarchal society, so women are highly valued in the families, in the relationships. And they're animist, right? So they have this same connection that many of the Polynesians do to the ocean and to rivers and trees and rocks They hold many things sacred besides just imaginary gods. So I think that, to me, that, the idea of there being like kapus on the reef and kapus on the forest, and then areas like there are many areas on the property here where are called pamali. Pamali means sacred, and in the pamali areas you can't touch without a ceremony, or you'll never be able to like change those. You just need to take care of them, and make sure that the sacred trees are the ones that are getting the energy and stuff. There has to be a ceremony with a priest, and you go in there, and it's not a priest in the way that we think of priests. These are really, like, usually nowadays, like really old men with very few teeth from all the betel nut chewing, and all their fabric is made from the ikats that their wives or families have woven for them, and usually like a cane and some really wild hair and eyes and
chicken
just
feather or something.
deep,
Rooster feathers.
deep. These are the priests, they're the ones who are like really looking at every moon phase and looking at all the emergence of the animals and everything happening, and hasn't been disturbed in thousands of years, their way of life. And their religion here is called Kepercaya Marapu. It means we trust in the way of the ancestors. And I think that's an easy thing for people who are humble and, can really look at things in a big worldview to relate to. And that's, I feel, is a big reason why we have such a easy, while they've accepted us in a lot of ways really well, and also in the way that we really just revere them and their way of life. And in everything we do, we really want to foster the continuation of the culture and the skills. And of course, in that, just better their lives in general.
And they're cultivators of the land, like you said. Because at first, you drive down the road, and it just looks like a forest on both sides. But if you have an eye, you notice that actually it's cultivated. That people are actually working that property, and there's that fruit tree there, and there's that coconut there, and there's that tree that offers you the vine to tie your house with there, and there's. So actually, the way that they do it is kind of reflection of the way that you're doing it too, and utilizing the hillsides for the way that the water drains, and making it just more like a food forest, right, opposed to like a cultivated land and property. Yeah,
I've been so inspired by that on the island in our short time of a few weeks of seeing just literally every hill you crest, you see more growing. And, where we come from, largely you see monocultural approaches, and then you'll see a little pocket where someone's got some diversity growing, and it's all exciting. And on your eye, just on the eyeball, it's pleasing because of the pattern work of diversity. And then you see another section that's just straight lines, and just the response I feel in just my eyes when you're passing through is just like, nothing to see there. There's just this uniform space that is devoid of a thriving system. And so here it's so wonderful to see, like you're saying, cassava and papaya and coconuts and so many other plants that I can't identify with. But I was wondering how the nature of the ocean here and the nature of the people reflect each other, because I know that, we are reflections of where we live. And this ocean here is pretty powerful, and it feels to me like the most Hawaiian, Polynesian, Indonesian mix I've ever encountered. And it seems like you all have that happening here on your space as well, like that blend.
Yeah.
Do you feel that? Do you look around and just go, wow, look at all these reflections of us all in this space?
Yeah, 100%. I assume as ocean feels very common. I had maybe 12 winters in Hawaii, 12 years, living there and surfing mainly the North Shore of Kauai and the Big Island. And it's raw when the surf comes up. 95% of the people are like, when's it going to go down? So when you get a swell in Zumba, you never forget it. And the waves aren't rapping waves. The waves are really raw and hitting, with full force from Antarctica. They are often come with wind, and the tides are 2 to 3 times any other island. So the tides are a huge effect on that. That's not so common with Hawaii, but definitely tides play in. And then, it's got Indonesia for sure. because it does have the moments when it all stops. And for months, especially around the shoulder season, everything's very still, and you can get this really far, the swells that are coming from so far away, and they're just nothing but ground swell, and they're just the right amount of energy, and then it does look 100% Indo. And then I also feel too a connection to West Oz. From a year I lived in Western Australia, and in the Red Bluff in Nauru and Qualba Station, and the way the waves hit there. They come up, they're close to the Roaring Forties, but they're far enough away where they've gotten clean, and they're not like, they're not pure storm surf or anything like that. It's like as much energy as you can have, combined with like just the where it just gets to the level of perfection that you're after, right? Like with howling desert offshores and stuff like that. So, yeah, Sumba is a menagerie of those for sure.
Yeah. We've had a few yarns while we've been here, Christian, where we talk about permaculture and of course surfing and other ocean activities. And it seems to me like you all here are really cognizant of that, how these things fit in. And it's not just because you have guests coming to stay with you and you want to provide a great time, but just that flow where, like you mentioned before briefly, when the swell dips, you go dive, or you have many things to fill the spaces. And it seems to me like a lot of modern surfing culture these days has kind of been industrialized and monocultured, where a lot of surfers have one thing they do, and that's just the way they access the ocean, and that's that. Is this also something that's just grown for you all, where there's a diversity of ocean interests and ways to connect with the ocean over time, or is that from the very beginning, from where you came from? Hawaii is a place where water people have so many water skills. The BVI zones, people are sailing and inter-island stuff. Do you feel like those interests have come from way, way back for you all?
For me, it came up because of the place that I learned how to surf. And it was quite often had trade winds, so it was quite windy, but I just wanted to get in the ocean. So I would just put my fins on and swim out and go have a body surf or play around, dive under the waves and things. It was quite stormy, so you had to take your fins and there's currents and things. But so for me, I was never like attached to just the surfing. To me, surfing was fun, but it's the ocean, it's like Mother Ocean, and it's so healing, and it just makes you, resets you for the day, and, like that. And so for me, it has always, my relationship with the water has always been diversified, whatever she has to depict what's going to happen, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
So, and if, because if you want to surf and it's flat or something, it's, you can't really get away, but you can go for a swim or a snorkel, or, you can do something else.
And for you, Christian?
For me, I grew up on a boat. I remember, like, this 42-foot wooden yawl was your planet, and until you stepped overboard, and then you were in all the heavens, and space was yours. So I remember putting a mask on when I was 3 or 4 years old in the Bahamas, and getting my first glimpse of the underworld, and then when you run out of food, or you're hungry, or you're tired of eating canned peaches, and Dad grabs a 3-prong and he goes over and spears a big beautiful hogfish or something on a coral balmy out in the middle of nowhere, then you're like, whoa, that was cool, and that's delicious, and that's sustenance, and that's strength, and that's like, makes you want to get up and do that again, kind of thing again tomorrow. And so, I was a diver before I was a surfer, and then he was, of course, a surfer, but in the Caribbean, the waves are a little farther apart, so we would sail from island to island to the next good wave. And just got an old hand-me-down surfboard and started surfing, and of course sailing is the whole thing, because you're sailing from place to place. So it's like the surfing, diving, sailing thing is there. And I feel now, looking back on my life, ending up on Kauai when I was 19 years old, and really like biggest board was a 7.2, thinking that was like you'd never ride that, because like why would when the waves were that big, like maybe a couple times a year you'd need your 7.2 or something, and and then after decade in Hawaii, 11.6 single fin gun is your biggest board, and the 7.2 is kind of this forgotten realm of like in betweenness. Totally. Are you riding your fish? Or are you riding your like 8.0 or like the 7 footer became obsolete? So and then so a little tide pool where I grew up in the Caribbean is what I felt like, where I learned everything about the ocean, but in a very beautiful and detailed way. and then went out and got thrown into the Pacific, where the oceanic peoples had been going for thousands of years. And they were so evolved that they had sailed their canoes from island to island, from island chain to island chain, that they have voyaged beyond the horizon and set up cultures and brought with them the plants they needed, had the foresight to bring the plants and the animals they needed. And I was like, got to land in that culture and learn from those people and make, really beautiful Hawaiian friends and be able to go to the programs in the University of Hawaii where you can learn as much as you want about Hawaiian culture. You can get a PhD in Hawaiian language or, Hawaiian plants, and it was mandatory that when you went to university there that you did Hawaiian studies, so that you had to go down into Waipio and work in the lo'i and plant taro and learn how to build an imu. And so all of those things were, sort of congealed into where we are now and what we are able to share here on the ground in Sumba with people.
It kind of brings us back to that full circle of being similarities of Hawaii in that sense, because when we first arrived here to Sumba, I just said, I need to bring the Hawaiians here. They're living it. They're living what they're trying to teach and learn again, because I felt like it was so similar to what I had been studying and, what we've experienced in Hawaii. I just felt like these people were very familiar, super familiar to living in Hawaii, the Hawaiian people. And they have the same grass, it's along, they built the walls around their villages. They dealt with the same animals and plants type of thing, the pig and the banana and the taro, or they use a cassava down here, but there was so much similarities that I almost can just see the migration, like coming across at some point.
And knowing Hawaiian language, so many of their words
a few of their
are the same or similar.
Well, a few that we know, a few that we can recognize with our minimal expertise in the local language, though the local dialect.
Yeah, but the most important ones, right?
Yeah,
like
coconut.
Like Hawaii, like coconut is niu, right? And here it's ni. And water is, here it's we. And in Hawaii it's ai. And mata, I is maka here, and or vice versa. Mata is here. So yeah, the language, you could trace that across, Micronesia, Melanesia, Polynesia. And so in a lot of ways, like, these are kind of the seed people too of the people that started migrating, looking thousands of years back. So it's kind of exciting to be able to come back and be in a place that's so untouched and so pure, but yet have been to a place that's so advanced, Hawaii and Tahiti, and be able to try and cross-pollinate that and bring some of that knowledge back. We were so close. Hokulea, when they circumnavigated the world, sailed 30 miles off the coast here. And we got in touch with them. Our friends were the captains on the escort boat. And we were like, you guys got to come in. And Hokulea's got to come here. We'll give you all the coconuts you need. And get some new sustenance. And they had just come from, I think Sydney or something like that.
It was so funny, though, because we didn't realize they were there. There was no internet here or anything, It was on the early days. We just got wind of it at some point, but it was a little too late to make the connections, It was kind of funny. We did have one of their crew come out to visit us. They heard us from Bali, but that was really fun. When
they're navigators. So next time they circumnavigate, they're definitely coming into Neidu Bay here and going to stay with us.
At the heart of both the cultures, Sumbanese and Polynesian, there's this belief in the aliveness of all things, the spirit of every animate and inanimate object, respect for the systems around us and our place as a small part of those systems, or a big part, and even a regenerative, reparative, important part of systems, which is so different than the story, the narrative that we often tell ourselves in Western culture as humans being a cancer, a mishap in a way as a species because of the destruction we've wreaked on so many of the systems that allow life. And what I see here is the way you all are picking up those old and ancient ways, old threads, learning from this unbroken culture, the Sumbanese way, and also blending modern permaculture in what you're offering to guests who come and stay, and also in the way you're engaging with the land. Do you have any thoughts about permaculture's place in picking up old ways as a way for our modern Western minds that have been shaped to think of ourselves as destructive, as dominating, and how permaculture can help us to reframe?
Well, I think permaculture is founded on the principles of looking at how civilizations have survived for thousands of years in continuity. And so I think they have a reverence for, the ancient ways of doing things. And it was, some Western educated professors or students that congealed all that and packaged it into a system that we as Westerners could perhaps learn from, and that could become a thing that was spread around the world in universities and courses. And of course, you're not going to get all the gist of that, because to be able to learn what you need to learn from those cultures, you need to go and learn with those. You need to go and live with those cultures. You need to eat with those cultures and laugh with those cultures and shit with those cultures. And you need to do all the, realize every aspect of it. Yeah. So I don't think that in any way it's it's too much of a privileged idea or concept. If you're really looking at the ideas that are put down, maybe the way that it's, spread around the world now and the popularity that it has on Instagram and wherever else, maybe those things tend to be like a little bit like that. But really, the best permaculture educators I've come across are looking at what's available around you and are going to do it with what's there. We had a wonderful Australian man come and co-teach our last permaculture course, and he was, while we had all these beautiful drums and all these beautiful different planter containers and blah, he's just like, just get that piece of bamboo and we'll knock that together. We'll put some coconut leaves over it. And he had really worked a lot, around the world, in Africa and the Philippines and stuff, where they had no money and they had to do this without any money. So I think, we're in a fortunate place because we're able to import outsiders and then import outside capital, and then have the means to basically do whatever we feel is right, the best situation or the best technique to grow things. But really, we need to look at the people here that are growing things in our area, the locals that are still surviving on just their skills and just the land and just the water. And there's many of them, and while we can criticize them and say, oh, you're using, the pesticide, or you're using the artificial fertilizer or whatever, but they are surviving, right? If we wanted right now to survive on what we're doing here, we're a far cry from that. So to point your finger at somebody because, oh, they're using, conventional methods to grow food that they live on. They're not buying any food, they're growing their own corn as soon as the rain hits. They're growing the cassava through the dry season. They're growing the rice through the other season. They're raising animals on everything left over in all the grasslands so that they have protein. And so, yeah, it's definitely not something that we look down upon as, the people that we're living and learning from.
But they were also doing that before the chemical companies came in.
Yeah.
I mean, their grandparents were also growing food and living and surviving for thousands of years. So for me, I often feel like it's nice when I have a chat with the women in the kitchen or something, and we can talk about these things. Not that we're saying I never feel like we say, don't use that or you can't use that. But the fact that we are not using it causes them to take a look. And also, it's just a pity that these chemical companies have come in and, they package it in very small, affordable packages. And actually, the people don't realize, I think, in the beginning, what it is or what it's going to do to their land or their people.
Yeah.
They just
the
really
people
have
who
no
invented
idea.
those chemicals are only now just coming around to what the long-term health and ecosystem impacts are.
Yeah, so it's really dangerous. And they call it medicine. So the language for pesticides here is obat, which they call it medicine. So what I've been saying is, no, it's not medicine, it's poison, it's rachun. Say the next, so it's quite...
Yeah, in Indonesian, obat means medicine. And
they call the pesticide medicine, they call it obat.
Yeah. And there's no distinction between pupuk, which is the artificial fertilizer that they buy, from the, the conventional grower supply store, and pupuk, which is the compost that we make.
So they think it's the same thing. They kind of might think it's the same kind of thing. Like, oh, yes, we use the horse poo from under our house, but here it is. If I don't have the horse poo available, here it is in the bag. But it's
probably
not the same.
Conventional farmers in America or Australia would not be so far off that same practical perspective. Maybe they use different words, but they're using the same practices and devaluing soil and crop health.
I think in the beginning we were looked at as total lunatics for the way we were trying to grow food. And of course it was like, it's taken a lot of work and a lot of, closing all of our waste loops and a lot of growing soil and growing compost and using animals and their manures and using humans and their manures and getting that onto what we're trying to grow. But now we're getting this biomass, this amount of biomass that's gotten exponential, and that's all going back in the soil, and the soil's growing like it's exponentially holding more water than it was before. So we have these cycles that now 9 years in, they're seeing like, holy cow, like this is kind of working for these guys. Like, and although we do have a lot more labor, luckily we have lots, 4 guys helping us in the garden full time, in the gardens, agroforestry, animal systems, taking care of the whole, helping taking care of the horde, everything. We have four guys, and myself, and sometimes a Western volunteer. But we're showing how much food can be grown in this way, and so now they're really starting to take note. And I think that 2 of our guys are capable. They've the seed of caring for the earth has been planted in them, and the connection is like, I can feel that connection with them, that they actually care and that they're actually realizing how much food they've learned to grow and all that kind of stuff. And these systems that, we've had maybe 6 or 7 teachers from all around the world come and share permaculture with us. And then, every course there's between 7 and 15 people coming for the courses. So we've had a couple hundred people come and study with us, and our garden guys are the facilitators as well, and take part in every activity as well. So they realize that there's a lot of people interested in this, and there's a lot of people sharing this, and there's a lot of great knowledge there. And then now they don't think we're such, lunatics anymore. That we're, at least are doing something that's working. And I think over time is when these systems really pay off. And as our avocados come in that we planted from seed, and as our breadfruits come in that we planted from seed, our jackfruit, they had 1, 2, 3, 4 fruit per tree last year. Now I'm looking at like 40 fruit on them. So we're going to really like hit this ramp of like abundance in the next few years. And that's where people are, that's when we're already having enough to share. And that's where we're going to be like, okay, well, how do we like get this food to the people who need it the most? And, in a way that's going to be the most effective at doing the most good.
I'd like to change direction a little bit. It's one thing to bring yourselves as a young couple out into remote Indonesia and set up camp. It's another thing to raise a family here. Can you speak to the reasons why you chose to stay and raise your 3 girls in this place?
Well, probably because we loved it here and we had 3 girls. We actually only had 2 when we started Nolankala.
Yeah.
They were both made here. Deha was born in Bali because she was our first, and we weren't sure what birthing was going to be like. And we wanted to do it in a place where we had support if we need it. And then Kamali, we wanted Ka'ale's mom, who doesn't travel so well, to be a big part of the birth. She wanted it, and we wanted it. So we birthed on our homestead in Hawaii, on our farm in Opiikau. And they were back here. Both were back on Sumba within 6 weeks or so. And then Kaleleanu, our third, Kale had good births, and we had good support. And we decided that we wanted to birth here on the land at Nolankala. And my mom is a midwife.
Christian's mom.
My mom's a midwife, and she's birthed all of her grandchildren, all of her 8 grandchildren. Yeah, so it was the life kind of chose us out here. We got called to come to Sumba, and we were just married. And I had I guess my position was volunteer pretty much, and your position was volunteer, but they flew us here, and we were like ready for kind of a trip. We were getting ready to go down to Peru and Chile and drive around and surf, and had a friend who traveled and said how awesome it was. Then somebody's like, we'll fly you down here and you can work for 4 months.
Days? Can you be here in 10 days?
And so, that just kind of happened to us, and we liked it. And then Kale became the volunteer project coordinator of the Sumba Foundation, and then yoga teacher, and then I sort of wore bunch of different hats at Nihiwatu, but I was mainly running the water sports as a waterman and captain. And then our first was born maybe 3 years in. About our third year in, we were like, man, might be ready for a kid like soon. And then she was like 8 weeks pregnant or something like that, 6 weeks pregnant, you know, like, or maybe just 6. Yeah, it was a surprise, but right at the moment where we felt like this could work. And so that's how the kids evolved with life here. It wasn't really a choice of like, we're going to take them from there and bring them here. I think that would have been much harder. But because we were here and we had a means of life here, or at least a vision of a means of life. In the beginning, it was all kind of a, like running on, fumes kind of thing, just camping. We literally took the life we had there and planted it here, jumped into the forest, cleared here it was grass rather than old Hawaiian forest. And you could see the terraces that people had farmed on before. We're like, oh, that's a good place to put a bungalow because it's already like flat and level, and like do that, and looking at the surf. And then when we, then we kind of used the farmland to build the bungalows. And so there was like this rocky, outcroppy kind of very little soil land. And we're like, okay, well, we need to make gardens there. And we had learned, permaculture had taught us that soil is like the least permanent thing in the whole system, so that you could grow your soil really quickly. And so we decided to make raised beds and fill them with the soil that we grew. And those are our gardens now. And then we were learning, more intensely the agrofloresta from the Brazilians and exposure that we had gotten learning permaculture, and started to do food forest and take our focus away from annual gardening crops that we thought were so important and so great, which are great to have, rocket and fresh lettuce and microgreens and that kind of stuff. And now we're focusing like 70% on perennial food systems. So it's been an awesome adventure, and the kids have come along the way. And our first is now 14, and she is just at the age where Zumba isn't enough for her, as far as, socially, maybe, and also probably looking, academically. She needs to get some time away from mom. Mom's raised them till now through various systems, and they're very intelligent and bright and skilled in so many things, but they need to have friends.
So for me, my mom always says now, oh, I'm so happy that my grandchildren are being raised down there because of certain situations of the modern world. And,
like what?
And America's ways, especially, I guess, the internet and would be a huge one, and how it's taking over. And I guess, it just sounds like it's very busy over there and difficult for the child coming up. But having them out here, to me, it just always felt like they were a little bit sheltered, and they could really feel that connected to nature. And for me, nature is kind of what we are. We are a part of nature. We are nature. And in the modern world, it feels like there's such a disconnect from that, as far as in schools, in buildings, in the big lights and the air conditioning, and people are driving in their own cars, and just everything seems like it's getting more and more distant from that deep connection with, Mother Earth and where your food comes from and all of that type of thing. So for me, it came very easily because I was raised a little bit alternatively already in nature with food. The connection was seen, I like to know where the food is coming from. And like we discussed before, the appreciation of it. If you go to a shop and you're buying things, it just, maybe people don't even think, that where it came from or how it got there. It just comes in plastic wrap with styrofoam, and it's just whatever is food, and they forget, where it comes from. So for me, it was not such a scary thing to have them out here. It felt like it was healthy for them to be in their imagination and to be allowed to explore and learn on their own from nature and just naturally out of their own curiosities. The other thing that I feel allowed me to be very comfortable out here is that I didn't have a doctor growing up. Yes, I went to the dentist, but my mom was very into preventative health and natural remedies. And so I really didn't go, to a doctor. I didn't have to. Luckily, we were healthy. Yeah. I know not everybody, can be. But for me, I suppose, had that been different, it would have been a lot more confronting to be out here with a family.
Yeah. Yeah.
But because you feel like confident in keeping the immune system raised, they got a little cold, and you notice the small signs of it, like going back to that observing, you quickly put in some vitamin C from the papaya, from the lilikoi, from the passion fruit. You see that there's lots of this kind of remedies that you can use, if you snip it at the bud, snip it at the bud. If you can notice things like that, there's ways to prevent it. And so I felt pretty confident always about that, that was easy.
I'm curious about your relationship with parenting and risk and adventure. I've heard a few of the, or at least one guest joke about, what a nightmare occupational health and safety would have out here without the 6-inch mandated gaps between the stairs and you've created a space that necessitates presence. You have to pay attention to each step down the stairs. If you're not with it,
yes,
you might have a little tumble. You might find yourself on the stones. And I can imagine that has all been not only the product of building by hand, but also of intention, of creating a space that calls you to be in it.
Be present.
And not just upstairs between your ears, walking around with a phone in your hands, capturing all your attention. Can you speak to that and how acceptance of risk in the home space plays into how you parent, or what you've wanted to incorporate into your children's everyday lives?
I would say it incorporates awareness, and presence, like you said, that focus and agility, and strength and all of those things. And I noticed that with the local kids, they're just so nimble up and over the rocks and on that little stair and, up onto the bamboo deck or, whatnot.
5-year-olds, like 80 feet up a coconut tree getting breakfast.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's,
confidence.
Yeah.
Builds confidence.
It's definitely a built-in mindfulness thing. I call it that. When people arrive, we have the path that comes down, and we made it with these small stones, and none of them are perfectly flat, and they're all kind of placed in not the perfect manner. I didn't pay a lot of attention when we were making that. The guys just kind of put it up there. But now I'm like, and this is the mindfulness trail, which is that people come when they arrive here, and they have to watch every step. And not every step is paced like every step should be. Sometimes you have to take a smaller step, a little bit bigger step. And so, your toes will tell you right away if you're not mindful enough, you'll stub your toe.
We actually tell people when you greet them at the top, so if you want to look, stop. You need to stop and take a look.
Maka'ala, right? Do you know that Hawaiian? We interviewed a lady. Yeah, eyes wide open, paying attention.
Eyes wide open.
And also there is an edge. There is an edge on everything in life. And on many of our decks, there is an edge. It's a cliff. It goes down 80 feet and there's no railing. And for me, it's very interesting to see the different kids come. And some kids are like, whoop, right over the edge. And then other kids are like, run up to the edge and then stop. And then other kids walk up slowly and look over and then come back. So, while yes, there's a lot of risk involved there, the actual amount of incidents and accidents has been extremely small. Even granted, we don't have railings all around our second floor yoga studio and our top house here. The consequences are huge, and that's not a great thing, but we find that because the risk is so great, people back off.
But this does bridge on another topic, because it's beautiful because there are hands and people around. So as the child is young, like you see in this culture, the babies aren't even on the ground or set alone away from anyone else. They're always in someone's arms, or
and often older siblings,
or siblings,
little
cousins. Yeah. There's always someone to be with them, so they're getting nurtured in a way that they always have someone present, looking out for them, looking out for each other, and it really offers that in itself offers a sense of security as well, and also, Lele, she's very good about going and playing on her own and getting into imagination world, but also this kind of culture, and even being here with our helpers, our workers, our people, the children can walk off, but the gardener sees them and they say, hi, what are you up to? Or if the child has a problem, there's somebody there that can offer them some assistance, and help. So it's really nice to be able to trust the child as well. They get to feel where their boundaries are, and they get a sense of what they are capable of, and they know their limits and things like that. And trust them to explore that also is pretty cool for.
Yeah, I think also like, the microscopic realm on that too is so huge, in that our, Purell and like alcohol wipe after you touch anything and, and you can't touch, everything's got to be sterile and new. And our kids are like, yeah, let's, go in the chicken coop barefoot and get the eggs and, let's flip compost and let's dig in the soil and find, here's my worm farm, my 5-year-old's worm farm over here.
Her fish from the worm farm.
And, so biologically and also just, get the hands and the feet and the earth, that connection, that grounding is huge for everyone.
They've been healthy.
Yeah.
Yeah, very healthy.
Yeah, really speaks to the way that nurturing internal diversity allows us to nurture that on the outside too, and we become part of a symbiotic process.
Yeah.
What if the cost spin of living this wild, risk-accepting life here on the coast of Sumba?
I would say friends and family, like the immediate, the old-time friends and family that you left behind, that I left behind in Hawaii. But we've been able, because we are inviting people out here, we've been able to create our own type of friends and family and community. But it's a little bit remote in that sense. Like we're saying, like our 14-year-old feels like she needs to go off now because she's not finding that here.
Yeah.
When we started here, there was not another Westerner for about 8 miles. And they were, the people that we had kind of come from. And so, being sort of in doing this project, we really wanted to make sure that we stayed who we were through the life of the project, and the project reflected who we were as individuals, which isn't really like a typical hospitality offering. It's not the banana daiquiri with the umbrella in it by the infinity pool. It's a saltwater chlorinated pool running on solar power that overlooks the waves that your husband's surfing and you're reading the book.
It's still an infinity pool, though.
Chilling.
It's an epic pool.
And we're not really big drinkers. We're really focused on everything we're talking about is health and, alcohol, and alcohol abuse kind of goes against that. So we don't mind, a beer here and there, a wine here and there, but we're not a party place. It's not the bar place. It's not the
to call it a
place.
retreat.
Retreat from everything else. So I think that just the nature of the place really is something that we've always wanted to convey to everyone that comes here. And we want that to stay, a reflection of who we are, be evident in everything that's here, and in everyone's experience. And we always felt that everyone would come here as much for what isn't here as for what is here. And we're nearly done, really, I think, building this project. And it's not like it's not like we're going somewhere else and going to do another project. No.
Go back to the beginning.
But it's also like,
place the bamboo.
it's also, start over from the ones that are falling down when we started. But it definitely does feel like we've reached a really beautiful plateau.
Yeah, we're going to take our first holiday in a few days.
Without kids.
Without kids.
Wow.
14 years of first one.
Wow.
About 4 days
when this is your home, I can't
days.
imagine where you could go on holiday and feel great about it. Like,
it's just to have a little space for us and get away from the work and everything else. Should be fun.
You've built this
interesting,
incredible life and do it from what we can see after this short time together with such love and respect for one another and the land and your family. But what I see in you is such a powerful partnership built on letting one another be who you are. And I'd love to know, after more than 2 decades together, what have you learned about partnership in these kind of projects and building a family and a life to share with others?
Choose love. Right? Let go. Accept. Communicate. Yeah. For me, I've always been learning mostly to communicate my needs and to be able to express more of, to express that. And to stay strong in your own, to always to keep yourself healthy and in a balanced way, because if you're not feeling your strength inside, then it's a lot more complicated when it comes to 2 or 5, having a family of 5. You're not just your one person. You have all these different little energies to balance. So if anyone is off, if any one person is off, your whole family feels that. So I think as much as everybody can, keep their internal strength healthy, whether it's like getting enough rest or getting exercise or eating healthy or whatnot, like when you're feeling good, it's really quite easy to accept something that might, be said that's harmful or something that someone does without realizing. And when you're in your inner strength, you can kind of accept it and forgive it or mention it or resolve it in a lot more of a steady kind of a manner, opposed to like outlashing or, if you're not feeling centered in yourself, then it's a lot more emotional roller coaster ride. So it seems.
I think for years I felt like, I just got the most amazing wife, so beautiful and so easy, and I'm just so grateful for it. And then like one day she's like, I kind of need to start telling you how I feel. And I kind of need you to start listening. And I was like, oh, okay. So, there's been some bumps in the road. And really, yeah, it's not all easy. But it's all love, for sure.
Can you tell me about Ka'ale's name? You told me this morning when the sun was still below the horizon, but I didn't have the recorder on properly.
So my wife was given the most fitting name possible for her as a person. And how do you do that in the beginning of someone's life? But her Hawaiian uncle, Melvin, was asked by her father to help name her child, which is a very common thing in Hawaii. And Melvin chose the name Ka'alemalu, which means the gently rolling wave. And she is the gently rolling wave.
He actually chose Ka'aleo Kakai, which was a lot stronger. But then my mom, seeing that I was a girl, said, oh, could you calm that down a bit? And it went to Ka'alemalu. And so I always say, oh, gosh, if they would have sent me Ka'aleo Kakai, I would have been out there charging the big waves with Christian. But instead, I'm here on the Ka'alemalu, the gentle rolling swells, which is nice, too.
Right.
Last question. Why are we here?
We're all here because we're not all there. I think I'm here because I've kept my eyes really open as I was traveling around the world from small kid days till now, just everywhere I went. Trying to go not as a tourist, but as a traveler, and not as a guest per se, but to try and like really get hands-on and get dirty with whatever's going on, whether it's like, how to clean that fish or how to fix that boat or how to, sail or how to substitute teach or, dive or fix a car, just like really trying to keep their mind open and all that stuff so that and in that, I don't feel that there's anything I couldn't do. There's no skill, there's no nothing you couldn't fix. And I think just, keeping that mind wide open and absorbing everything. Everywhere you go, you're looking at everything and like taking little notes. You're like, oh, there's a little baby screwdriver. I might need that. I know where it is later. It's almost like it's a trait. I don't know. Doesn't seem like it becomes so easy, so common anymore, but it used to be just how people went about life, just gathering skills and accumulating them rather than being like, I'm this, and just like really, I think there's no way we could have done what we've done if it wasn't to just not be afraid to take a risk and take a chance and try and do this and try and do that and fail, pick yourself up and keep going.
When you ask that question for me, I feel like it's more of like a question of spirituality and why are we here? This whole mystery of life, To me, that's what that provokes. And that is a mystery. And that seems like to me, it's always been a soul's purpose. What is that soul's purpose and that how to keep the light, to spread the light. That's what I always have felt like, is just finding that inner light that can shine out to others and to shine out to the world and to connect with nature and all of the mysteries and to see that unfold has been my journey for this life, to see how I can connect with the dance of nature and to feel that inside.
Well, Nalinkala is such a marriage of both of those answers. Your willingness
100%.
to give everything a go. Your capability is just astounding. And the level of expertise and confidence and competence you have in so many different facets of life here is just incredible. And Ka'ale, you bring the light, and you can see how that is woven into life here. Every structure without walls, inviting you back out into the living world to connect. It's really such an incredible offering, and we're so grateful to have gotten to experience it. Thank you for extending the Aloha spirit to us.
First of many visits from the family.
Thanks so much for listening with us today. If you like what you heard, please consider sharing an episode with a friend. Our editor this season is the multi-talented Ben Alexander. The podcast soundtrack was composed by Shannon Sol Carroll, with additional tunes by Dave and Ben. We'll be continuing today's conversation on Instagram, where we're at Water People Podcasts, and you can subscribe to our very infrequent newsletter to get book recommendations, questions we're pondering, behind-the-scenes glimpses into recording the podcast, and more via our website, waterpeoplepodcasts.com.